Hello. There we go. I can turn the microphone on. We're off to a good start. Thank you all for being here. So excited to see you all. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker today, Dr. Rich Milner. You all received a copy of his book. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go over. He is here with us from Vanderbilt University, where he is a distinguished professor. He is also the first Black professor to earn tenure there. He is an elected member of the National Academy of Educators and the current president of AERA, one of the largest research teaching organizations. He's going to talk to us today about co-constructing opportunities. I know it's been a long morning, so we're going to go ahead and get him on up here because you'd rather hear him talk than me.
Cool, thank you. All right. How about, is that okay? All right. This one might be better. Too close to what? To the speaker? I don't know what I should do then. Try this one. All right. How about that? Let's give it up. Let's give it up. Let's see, everybody up in here should be clapping, right? Because what you realize is, as you're educators and teachers, what we do is we adapt and we make things work, right? We make things work. So, and the grace that you give is the grace that you will receive back. So let me be clear here that this work is hard, but the work is so important. It's so important. And so I want to just take an opportunity to just applaud you. I am grateful to you for transitioning into this work. This work is so important. And everything I've read about it and read about you is just really demonstrating that that UNLV in this state in a lot of ways is really at the cutting edge of what can happen when we think outside of traditional ways in which we've done things. So give it up for yourselves. Give it up for yourselves. Thank you. I also want to thank Morgan for the gracious introduction and all of the support. Thank you for that. To Nicole and to Kelsey and just everybody responsible for my being here. I realize that Kenny Varner has a Rolodex, a wide range of folks with whom you could have invited. And so it just means a lot to me that you chose me. You have I don't know what officials might be in the room here from the university, but you all better hold tight and make sure you hold on to Kenny because you have a true gem in Kenny. Give it up for the team who pulled this together. And also to all the postdocs, special shout out to Borner who has just been so kind to me, and my partner, my wife is here with me. So I don't know if y'all realize this, but like UNLV is like the real, well, Nevada, Las Vegas is the place that everybody wants to come and hang out for a little bit. So when I told my wife I was invited to Vegas, she was like, "Oh, when are we going?" Right? And in fact, she has been here with me, and we went to the Usher concert the Usher concert. That's right, I said it. And it was amazing. It was amazing. So I'm hoping I can get through today because I'm so full from Usher last night. So I have a full agenda, full presentation that I want to share with you. And Kenny wanted me to talk a bit about this book, which I believe you have, and I'm going to draw some from a second book that you have. Start where you are, but don't stay there. If we have any tweeters out there in the universe. Please tweet. In fact, I'm asking you to tweet twice. Hopefully something is said that's going to resonate with you throughout. And for some people, they aren't reading full manuscripts, they aren't reading full books, but you're moving into a place where people are going to look to you as experts or as people who can shed light on really pressing issues in the field, right? So you're no longer these individuals who have these sort of individual ways of thinking. You're really representing a profession, right, that is often scrutinized and so forth. So this gives you an opportunity to kind of put in the ethos some of what you might hear. Nobody's taking a picture of this, so I won't see any tweets later. I get it. But if at least tag me if you do decide to tweet. So the work, I wanted to start with what I'm calling opportunity imperatives. And this work is really complex. It's really complex. And we've got to be mindful that what we're grappling with are a range of issues, right, that we should be considering in this fight or in our quest to be excellent. Everything from recognizing the overrepresentation of students of color who are pushed pushed out of the classroom and into detention and so forth, detention, suspension, ISS, to myths about achievements related to Asian American children, to the narrowing of curriculum, where they're pushing out curriculum practices in the areas outside of literacy and mathematics. And so for some young people, they're saying, oh, they don't need PE. What they really need is more math, or they don't need to engage in band or dance or other forms of the art. What they really need, and we know from good research that is just not what we should be doing. So the work related to education is not only what you do in the classroom every day. The work is really thinking about a broader ecosystem, and all of these areas and these issues are at play. And so you're in a place where you can't think in a simple way. I can't even say the word, right? Because this work is much, much more complex than a simple way of approaching. So these are some of the areas that you're going to be thinking about, right? In addition, we know that especially as we move outside of so many people were laid off and businesses were closed and so forth. But I wanted to show you some data. This is going to be a data-driven talk. And so if you look at these data sort of give you a picture of what it means for folks who are living below the poverty line. I always use a family of four as my reference. There are four of us in our family. And if a family earns $26,201, that family is considered above the poverty line, right? And so I just want you to just get a sense of what families are and people are grappling with in throughout the country. In addition, if you look at these data show you the relationship between educational earnings and educational level and earnings, right? So you see the more education one earns, the higher the possibility of their earnings. But if you look at these data show you how even though we see correlation between educational earnings and educational attainment and earnings, we see that people who are labeled as men earn significantly lower than do people who are women. You see those data, right? And so what does that tell you? It tells you that we're still living in a system and in a society where, based on the body in which one lives, these systems reify, right, these kinds of practices or these kinds of ways in which young people and in which families might be living. So, young people who might be living with their mother, right? The mother, so and sometimes I think we make these notions that the parents don't care or they aren't putting forth effort, right? And so those deficit ways of thinking lead us to particular kinds of practices where we don't recognize that every young person in that environment is coming in that environment with a set of assets, with strengths, right, from which you have got to learn to draw from. learn to draw from. In addition, we're going to talk about not only socioeconomic status, but we're going to talk about the R word up in here. We're going to talk about race, right? And we're going to talk about race, not because Rich Milner says that race is important, but because we know from all of the research that we do that race is a central aspect of the work of understanding, working with young people, right? And so race, you can't sit through this session and see race and skin color as synonymous, right? There are akin, but race is so much more than skin color. Race is so much more than skin color. Race is socially constructed. Race is legally constructed. So we could talk about these court cases here. Race is also historically constructed. It's physically constructed. It's contextually constructed, right? So when you mention the word race, you're talking about all of this. You're just not talking about phenotype. If you want to talk about phenotype, you're talking about color. So when you say, well, what color is a person? That's phenotype. But race is all of this. Y'all still with me? Okay, good. All right, y'all smile at me every now and then. You don't have to, all right. So this notion of race really is central because all of the indicators in your field say that you've got to understand race if you're going to do this work. Right? So just to be clear, thank you, right? So just to be clear here, right? Race is a central aspect of understanding. Now, racism has to do with power and intentionality. Now, I've done this work since 2001. So I started in 1998. And one day you look up and you become the senior person in the room, Kenny, right? You're like, I don't know how that happened, right? But you got to keep living. So I'm thankful that somehow, but I've very rarely met intentionally racist educators, right? That's not how most of the time racism manifests in the work we do. But racism shows up, and we're going to talk more about how it shows up and it manifests so many times unintentionally in the work we do, right? And so you've got to be mindful of the ways in which unintentional acts can actually do harm, can actually move into spaces of human suffering, right? And so for some of you, you're sitting there saying, oh, this is tangential, doesn't really matter. But for people who look like me, right? For young people who for my daughters, right? For my nieces and nephews, my cousins, right? They're experiencing an educational system that was not designed for them, right? And they're experiencing deep levels of trauma and human suffering in ways, right? That as educators, we have a chance to disrupt. Come on, y'all. Are y'all still with me? All right. So racism is what we've got to also think about as well. Now, I want to talk with you just a moment. This is not a rhetorical question here. Yeah, welcome, y'all. I'm glad y'all are here. Don't be sorry. I'm glad you're here. No, don't apologize. Y'all made it, right? And so I know you're dealing with, when you're working with elementary school students, but when young people show up, you embrace them, right? You got to be like, I'm so glad you're here, right? Yeah. Y'all not glad they're here? Yeah, I'm glad they're right. But yeah, I'm glad you're well. So what is it about the R word? What is it about race that makes it so hard, and racism that makes it so difficult for us to address and talk about, especially in mixed company? What is it about race that makes it so hard? Yes. Okay, I might get offended, right? What if I say something that is offensive? All right. Okay, great point. What else? Yes.
On the other hand, you're scared to offend somebody.
Okay, or I could be the offender, right? Okay, absolutely. What would you say?
I think sometimes it's hard because it feels like I'm talking to someone who will never understand.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Absolutely. So it's like, doesn't matter what I say. It's right. I got you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be exhausting, right? Absolutely. All right. Yes. People become defensive. Absolutely. So this notion of offense and defense, right, is, got you. All right, great. Yes. Right. So people aren't really willing to learn. And, sometimes for some reason, I'm like when I'm on planes or wherever I am, if I'm on a train or like people talk to me, they tell me their whole life story, right? I get on the plane and people are like, it's like I'm wearing a like, please talk to me vest or something. But and sometimes, I'm talking to these people and they'll want to start engaging me. Well, what is this thing called critical race theory? And why? And I say, I'm not doing it. I'm not having this conversation with you, right? Because there's not very much I can say in this moment that's going to change your mind, right? And so you got to be very mindful of your own mental health, of what you need to stay whole and what's necessary for you to be. And you have to decide what your work is. Now, your work might be talking to them about critical race theory, right? But you have to decide in your own moment what your work is, right? Are y'all with me? Yeah. All right, yeah. What about you?
I don't think people want to acknowledge the bias that you might have inside of you.
Right, absolutely. So this notion of introspection is important, right? So you can have great intentions, right? You can be a good person, but if you're not engaging in that self-work, right, it's going to be difficult for you to do the work and to engage in the kind of practices that can be transformative and humanizing and what I call opportunity-centered with young people. Beverly Gordon put it this way. Beverly said that it is difficult to critique the world and work to change it when the world works for you. Think about that for a moment. It's hard. Think about the ways in which the world works for you, right? And so some of you, even people who look like me, some of you are sitting here like, well, they need to try harder. Hello? Well, they just don't care about education, right? So somebody's, I got some, okay, right? I'm going to have some amens here, right? Yeah. Right? And so in that sense, because the world worked for you or because it works for your family, it doesn't mean that the people with whom you're working are inferior or that different because they're engaging in different kinds of practices doesn't mean that somehow you're superior to them because you've made different choices, right? It is a developmental process, right? Well, we've got to see and we've got to draw from the many assets. So why race, y'all? Race is essential because we know that there's an over-referral of students of color to special education, right? Most of the time for behavioral challenges. I was talking to a colleague earlier, and she was talking about the necessity of early identification to be able to support. There's an underrepresentation of students of color in gifted education. All of a sudden, and you can go back, this work goes back to Brown v. Board, right? So all of a sudden, to keep bodies separate, right, our little white babies became gifted, right? So that's a structural way in which we were able to maintain separation, right? Thirdly, students of color are over-referred to the office, and an overwhelming number of kids of color who are expelled and suspended. And of course, young people are still experiencing these aggressions, microaggressions, and the like. Now, research shows that there's a direct relationship between sense of racial identity and outcomes. What does that mean, Rich? What the research shows is that when I feel strongly about my own racial and ethnic identity, I do better, right? Not when I hate people outside of my own racial and ethnic identity, but when I feel good about my own racial and ethnic identity, I do better, right? And so what do we do to cultivate identity spaces in classes with students so they feel a sense? Students are receiving all of these negative messages along the way, right? And so the curriculum then has to disrupt that. The curriculum has to disrupt that. And I want to talk about these 4 areas related to how you might be able to build the kind of practices that could be potentially transformative. And I call them opportunity centered. One is around converging the curriculum with content. A second one is around understanding and advancing psychological, mental health, and wellness. And then the third is around disrupting push out and exclusion. And then finally, pushing the curriculum to social justice, the curriculum of social justice. And so I want to start by defining what I mean by the curriculum. The curriculum, y'all, are y'all still with me? Yes. The curriculum is simply what students have the opportunity to learn. The curriculum is the what. All right? And so students are experiencing a curriculum all the time. They experience a curriculum when they wake up in the morning, right? They experience a curriculum in their homes. They experience a curriculum on the bus ride to school. I've been trying to get one of my doc students to do an ethnography of the bus, right? And somebody can take that. You just give me credit. But students are experiencing a curriculum on the bus. They experience a curriculum as they're riding or as they're walking to and from school, right? So understanding that they're experiencing a curriculum not only in the great work that you're doing in the classroom with them, but they're experiencing a curriculum all the time, right? So the curriculum is just not some formal way of engaging. The curriculum is simply the what. The curriculum is the what. There are three forms of the curriculum that I want us to think about. The first form is the explicit curriculum. And the explicit curriculum is the curriculum that we write down. It's the curriculum that you're going to learn about from the graded course of study. It's the curriculum that you're going to learn and draw from standards. It's explicit. We know we're teaching it, okay? We write it down. But we also teach what's known as an implicit curriculum. And the implicit curriculum, don't miss this, is the curriculum that's hidden. Right? It's the curriculum that we don't write down. Sometimes the implicit curriculum is intentional. Other times the implicit curriculum is unintentional. Let me give you an example. When I taught high school English, I would ask students to, straighten the desk before they before they went to their next classes, right? That was a curriculum. There was a learning opportunity embedded in that, and I didn't write it down, right? But it was intentional. But the curriculum can also be unintentional, right? The implicit curriculum. So I'll give you an example of an unintentional implicit move. I was in a classroom, a middle school classroom, and the principal interrupted the teacher's class over the intercom and said, and asked the teacher to send 3 strong boys to the office to carry some books to the teacher's classroom, right? So there was an implicit lesson embedded in that request. You get it? Why not just send 3 students to the office to carry the books? So again, that was unintentional. The principal didn't mean anything by it necessarily, but there was certainly a lesson embedded in that request. You still with me? Are y'all still with me? We also teach, and this is the most fascinating form of the curriculum, we also teach what's known as the null curriculum. It's getting ready to get good. The null curriculum, y'all, is the curriculum that students learn from based on what we don't expose them to. Hello. Right? So students learn something when we don't expose, when we don't emphasize. They're learning something about the world. They're learning something about themselves. I spent a lot of time pre-COVID, I was telling Kenny I would do about 4 or 5 talks a month, right? And I would spend time on university campuses, and often when I was giving tours around campus, I would go into like the central administrative buildings, right? And when I would walk into these buildings, I would see these huge paintings that looked like they cost, thousands of dollars to construct, right? And what I would most of the time see was I would see white men on these posters, right? Around these walls, right? Most of the time they were donors or college presidents or university, presidents. What I didn't see was, and that's fine, right? If that's what you choose to spend your money on and who you want to start, right? But what I didn't see was enslaved Africans who built the place. Come on, right? I didn't see indigenous communities from which the land was stolen, right? Come on, right? And so, that's right, I said it, right? And so the reality is students are learning something. I learned something based on what's not being displayed. Does that make sense? So the curriculum, all right, y'all can clap if you want to then. Come on, clap. All right. So the curriculum then is not just what happens in this formal way of engaging. Students are engaging in a curriculum based on what's on the walls. They're engaging on the curriculum. And so what's left out tells a particular kind of story about what is valued and who is important, right? And who's important. As we said earlier, that racial identity is strongly correlated. And so the message then to students who go into that administrative building is that somehow these institutions emerged with only one kind of body and one kind of, does that make sense? So you've got to be mindful of how the null curriculum manifests. I did my undergraduate degree, I could go on this forever. I did my undergraduate degree at an HBCU, South Carolina State University in Orangeburg. Go HBCU, right? And in that work, I was an English major, and I took a whole course on William Shakespeare, right? Now, I don't have anything against Shakespeare, right? I learned all of these, these poems. It was just in sonnets, and I learned more about Shakespeare than I think you would probably really want to, know, right? But I didn't have an entire class on Toni Morrison. Come on, I didn't have a class on Langston Hughes, right? I didn't have a class on James Baldwin, right? I had an entire semester of Shakespeare. And so we decide, right? We decide what canonical texts are most important. We decide. We've decided that there's high ways of thinking about what students should be learning and lower, right? And so what is the message of my not learning, not having an entire class on Toni Morrison? The message is through the know that Morrison's work is not as important as Shakespeare's work. You get me? Right? And so and then we say, right? We say that, well, we want our students to be exposed to the greats. Greats according to whom? Does that make sense? So we reify these systems, and then we wonder why students feel like they are not worthy. We wonder why students are disengaged with education. We wonder why they show up and sometimes show out, right? Because the systems are designed to reify a particular kind of body to be successful, right? And so my charge to you, come on, y'all, is to disrupt it. My charge to you is to say, hey, we're going to do some things differently, right? We're going to create spaces. Don't miss this. We're going to create spaces where young people want to be, right? We're going to create spaces where young people want to be, right? Why is it that we talk about education and we talk about we're preparing them for the future? No, you're preparing them for now, right? They need to find joy now, y'all, right? What if they don't make it till tomorrow? Come on, y'all. They need to find joy now. These should be places where young people want to be. Young people should wake up in the morning like, let's go, Mom. Let's go, Dad. Come on, Nana. Right? That's the kind of places that we should create. Those are the kind of spaces that we should create, right? And that work of co-creating means that you got to be well and have some joy yourself. That's right, I said it, right? And so, sometimes what happens is we're grappling with, right? And each of us does. We have our own, issues that we're grappling with. But you got to be in a place where you understand where you are. You got to get in a place where you're asking yourselves and you're asking each other, how are you doing? Right? And the answer to that question is going to deeply impact the way in which you engage with those babies when they show up, right? And so that health is so important. It's so important. I got to move a lot faster. All right, so the curriculum should converge. The curriculum should converge with the who. Should converge with the what. It should converge with the where. That is where young people are. And more importantly, the curriculum should be a space where you are explicitly helping young people understand the why, right? Not just because I said so, right? But young people explicitly saying why it is they are learning and you're engaging with them in the task and so forth. The non-curriculum shows up. I don't know about you, but I didn't learn about Juneteenth and the Tulsa Massacre growing up. How many of you did? Okay, I'm not alone, right? Well, a couple people did. We got some high achievers in here, right? But it was taught to me through the know, right? I can't tell you the other stuff that I learned, but I didn't learn this. I didn't learn about the history and the importance of Black Wall Street, right? I didn't. Right? It was taught to me through the know. I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I taught at Pitt for 5 years, right? And I don't know if you all remember the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, just as an example. And what happened was the shooting occurred, and this is not an indictment of the school system necessarily, because this is what happened in most places. But the district sent over some school counselors, but then the way of work was, let's go back to the real work. This is the work. This is the curriculum, right? The curriculum is helping students understand what's happening in the social context, right? So they understand that their body, the practices, the issues that resonate with them are not tangential, right? They're not tangential. Or when the Pulse nightclub shooting happened in Orlando, Florida. Y'all remember that, right? So the curriculum, whether you live in Las Vegas, Nevada, Reno, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Nashville, Tennessee, if students see their identity space, don't miss this, connected to the bodies of those who suffer, connected to the bodies or to the communities that are harmed, then they can actually be experiencing harm themselves. You get it? So the connection I have, right? The connection I have, I may not know anybody who was shot in that club. But if my body, if my experiences, if my cultural practices, if my identity is tied to those bodies, right, it's going to impact. So what are you saying, Rich? I'm saying, right, that the academic, the social, is deeply impacted, right, by the academic is deeply impacted by the social. So in other words, you can't just focus in this work on the curriculum in a traditional sense, right? You have to understand that if I'm working through and trying to make sense of this, it's going to be hard for me to focus in on whatever it is you're trying to teach. Come on, right? And so it's not arbitrary, y'all. It's not arbitrary. Look at these data. Look at these data, right? These data show that our trans community, the trans communities are the communities that attempt suicide at the highest rate, right? The highest rate. And so when you think about the kinds of decisions that you make to connect with, right? The kinds of decisions you make to build the curriculum, the kinds of decisions you make to teach the null, are y'all with me? This is a matter for some of our young people of life and death. And I want to introduce this notion of what I'm calling vicarious trauma. Now, vicarious trauma is similar to what some classify as secondary trauma. But vicarious trauma says, and I'm drawing here from the health sciences, vicarious trauma says I could be traumatized based on how I see or how I view or the kinds of suffering that other people have experienced outside of my immediate experience, right? So even though I don't know people who were shot in the Pulse nightclub, or even though I don't necessarily know George Floyd, if I see my body, are y'all with me, connected to the bodies of folks who are slain, I could be experiencing vicarious trauma, right? And so understanding that young people are engaged, they're watching TV, they're on their parents' iPhones, right? This news is coming to them almost instantly, right? And it's infiltrating, it's becoming a part of how they think and a part of their mental capacities. And so you've got to be mindful. And so the curriculum must, y'all, it must be seen as a space of, as Rudine Sims Bishop would say, mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. Are y'all with me? So one of my daughters and I, we read 3 books last summer. And these are the books, so I'm just bringing these two just as representatives of the ways in which you might engage. One of the books was called From the Desk of Zoe Washington. And this book is a book about a young girl, Zoe, whose father has been incarcerated. Don't miss this, right? And she's never met her father, but she's a black girl, and she lives with her father. She lives with her stepfather, who's white, and her mother, who's a black woman. And they have a wonderful family unit. But Zoe has this yearning to connect with her biological father. And so she learned her father is in jail for murder, right? And so she learns that her father has been writing to her, right? Has been sending her letters. And her mother has been hiding them because she doesn't want her to have a relationship with her father, right? Well, Zoe finds out I'm not going to give the whole story away, I promise. But Zoe finds out, and so Zoe starts, communicating with her father. I'm not going to, spoiler alert, it's a great ending, right? But the point here is, this is an opportunity for young people in your classes to be able to see themselves. The curriculum should be a mirror, right? But the curriculum shouldn't only be a mirror, right? The curriculum should also be a window. And so my daughter doesn't understand what it means to have a father who is incarcerated. But my daughter does understand what it means to sometimes go behind my back and do things that she shouldn't be doing, right? Mirror, hello, right? Maybe it's just my kids, right? Just y'all kids are perfect, right? So the curriculum then is a mirror for her, because she's like, sometimes I might, do some, right? But the window then is a level of empathy. So it gives me an opportunity through the curriculum to tell her something about the broader world, to talk to her about incarceration, and to talk to her about the fact that sometimes people are in prison and they shouldn't be, right? Let's be frank. When you'll find that out, but anyway, but the curriculum also should be a sliding glass door. And the sliding glass door there's this notion of you're moving back and forth, right? So there are elements of a text, right? Elements of a text that resonate, and you're like, this is just like my experience, right? But then there are moments that you're going to move on the other side of that sliding glass door, and you're like, this is not a part of my experience. Just because it's not a part of your experience, it's not a part of your identity, doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about it, right? Which is why I'm fine with taking a class on Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare, all right, right? But that's not the only thing I should be doing. Does that make sense? And so the curriculum then should be so robust that young people are engaged, and they are showing up, they're yearning, they're begging you to go to the library, right? The curriculum is also, we also read a book called Front Desk, and Front Desk is about a young girl, Mia, whose family has immigrated to the U.S. from China, and they live in deep poverty. Deep poverty, right? And her parents are working really hard, and they're working at they start working at a hotel, and Mia is being teased because she doesn't have her clothes are not nice, and all these kinds of intricacies. Again, the curriculum then can be a place of a mirror for some students. It's a place for you to introduce, how to treat and be kind. Right? It also can be, I got to move on. We also read a book called Rules. And Rules is a powerful book about a young girl, Catherine, whose brother has autism. Come on, y'all, right? Are y'all still with me? And Catherine I'm not going to cuss, but Catherine is bad, right? Catherine don't play. Let me just put it like that, right? So, when people are, making fun of her brother, Catherine, you got to come through me, right? But Catherine is also in this place where she sort of just wants to move into a place where she's just I just want us to be quote unquote normal, right? Again, window, mirror, sliding glass door. It's a space for young people who may not understand autism or understand when a young person is experiencing a disability, right? So I highly recommend those. The curriculum then allows you to move outside of what's happening in the local classroom to a broader context. Remember I talked about the community? So I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I live in Brentwood, which is right outside of Nashville. And I live in a community, this is what it allowed me to do, according to Brookings, the most incarcerated zip code in the country. Right in Nashville. Everybody talking about how great Nashville is. Just let me be clear here that 37208 is the most incarcerated zip code in the country, right? And so guess what this book allowed me to do? Guess what Front Desk from the desk of Zoe Washington allowed me to do? It allowed me to say, and guess what? You live in a community right down the street that's the most incarcerated the incarcerated district in the U.S. You get me? You see the connection there? So it's not only the text is an anchor, The text is a launch, right? For the kinds of insights that so now she's saying, oh, wow, I'm learning. So it's not separated. It allows me to build what I call curriculum convergence. Can y'all see that? And then it allows me to move from the meso level to the macro level. And the macro level insight, come on, y'all, is that black folks represent 13.4% of the general population, but they represent 38% of those in the federal prison system. You get it? You see the links? Yes or no? Yes. Other opportunity-centered texts that I would encourage you to take a look at. These are some great books that I strongly do. You recognize any of them that y'all reading? Okay, all right, Nevada, do your thing, okay. These are some from older ones, all right. The opportunity-centered practices also should stress and advance psychological, mental health, and wellness. Now, mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his, her, or our own capacities and can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his, her, their community. And I want to underscore this notion of normal, right? This notion of normal. What's normal for you might be qualitatively different than what's normal for other people. And so this work around being empathetic is so important. You know, people will say, well, my dad lost his job when I was 12, or my mom, transitioned from this earth when I was 8, and I'm fine. And I say, that's you. That's you. But the human condition says that people respond differently to situations. And so your lens can't be, resilience or be gritty or get over it. It has to be, we're going to work with you. I am going to work with you where you are, and we're going to get you where you need to be together, right? It also shows that about 50% of all mental health challenges begins by age 14. We also know that 10% of all children experience some type of mental health challenge that can impact their functioning, and that 70% of youth, don't miss this, in the carceral system suffers from some type of mental health challenge, right? What are you saying, Rich? What I'm saying is that, to me, we don't need more SROs in schools. What we really need are more counselors. We need more psychologists. We need more psychiatrists, right? And counselors, and counselors who, I got somebody on the amen corner that's getting, that's right. So what that tells us is, when you look at these data, we know that there's a direct link. And some of us talk about this as school to prison pipeline. I call it school to prison intersection. But we know there are direct links between fatality, police violence, and so forth, right? And based on that, most of the time, they're for bodies who have mental health challenges. When I was in Pittsburgh, how much time do I have? 1 minute. Only 1 minute? 10 more minutes. Okay, I'm gonna rush through the rest of these, but you'll have the slides, so don't worry. And you can reach out to me, okay? Because I've only gone through one of the tenets, right? So, so Kenny, you just have to invite me back. So I was doing, okay, I'm not gonna even share that story. But we also have to be mindful of push-out, right? We gotta be mindful of push-out. So if you look at these national data, on the left-hand side, I show you the proportion of students in school, and on the right-hand side, I show you the proportion of these students who experience, let's say, inside-of-school suspension. So black students represent 15% of the general population, but they represent 32% of those who experience in-school suspension. If you look at these data, again, I'm showing you that black students represent 15% of the general population, but they represent 38% of those who experience outside of school suspension, right? And then some people have a nerve to ask, well, I don't understand why black kids aren't achieving in the same level as our white students, for instance. Well, they're not in the school. They're not in the classroom, right? So if we're going to be transformative and opportunity-centered, you got to understand these data. And so some of you might say, well, Rich, those are national data. Well, let's talk about y'all right here in Clark. So that's right, I said it, right? And so if you look at these data, black students represent about 14% of the general population, but they represent 31% of those in school suspension. If you look at these data, outside of school suspension, 14% of the general population, 36% of outside of school suspensions. For referrals to law enforcement, right? These are your data, right? These are drawn from the Office of Civil Rights. And I know we have some people who are zooming in, so I pulled a few other data points as well. So we see the same pattern. So in this situation, you see that Latinx students represent about 10% of the general population, but double in terms of ISS. White students represent non-county. And while we focus on black males, what we also know is that a black boy is 3 times more likely to be suspended than a white boy. Black girls are 6 times more likely than a white girl to be suspended, right? And so I just want to be mindful here. I don't want to play oppression Olympics, but when we talk about the focus on black boys, that's important. But when we think about black girls, that population of students is a population that's being underserved and being marginalized and consistently being, these black girls are seen as what the data show, they call it adultification. So what we see more times than not is that these black girls show up and we see them as, the teachers see them as adults. They don't see them as young people, 12-year-olds who are children are being treated as 16 and 17-year-olds. And this shows up through the data. Not what Rich Milner is saying. This is showing up in data over and over and over again. What does that mean? It means you have the possibility, the capacity to understand and to try to be transformative. Here's what the data show. Big takeaways. One is that if you want to decrease the quote unquote, if you want to address the achievement gap, you've got to address what the educational psychologists call time on task. So the more instructional hours young people have, the better their chances of success, right? So you want to keep those babies in the classroom. You got me? Amen? We also know that there's a difference, don't miss this, between punishment and discipline, right? So some people are like, oh, no. Discipline and punishment are not, we should be cultivating discipline. The challenge is how we punish, right? So black and brown students, this is another data point, and a critical one, don't miss, are y'all with me? So black and brown students are referred to the office for what's known as subjective infractions. What do you mean, Rich Milner? They're referred to the office for things like she's too loud or he's being disrespectful, right? Subjective. White students overwhelmingly are referred to the office for what's known as objective infractions, right? An objective infraction is I look at the data. Let's say you're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock, it's 8:05, right? According to a digital clock. That's a more objective referral, right? But the subjective referral is what we see, and this is the reason so many of our black and brown students are sent to the office and so forth. The teacher is so important because infractions tend to show up on a classroom level, and more times than not, they show up for non-compliance. Non-compliance, what do you mean by non-compliance? Let me tell you about these two little, I took the picture off because I didn't want to send the picture to go out into the world, but I normally have a picture here of my little sugar bugs. I have twin daughters. They're 12 years old. So, send me all the positive thoughts you can, because this when I tell you it's the hardest thing of my life. One of my friends told me, one of my mentors told me that your children bring you the most joy and they bring you the most sadness. I've never been happier, but I also have cried. I've never cried more. I love them so much. But anyway, they're twins. They're very similar. They look just alike. My poor mama still can't tell them apart, right? But one of them, if I give them a worksheet of, let's say, 20 math problems, one of them is going to do 26. She's going to make up some math problems, right? She's going to be like, look, Dad, I made up some math problems, right? She's a pleaser, right? The other one is going to do 6. And she's going to say, I figured this math worksheet out, right? Number 5 is like number 8. Number 2 is like number 16, right? And she's going to give it back to me like, here you go, right? Here's what I've come to understand. So 6, right, doesn't comply. I'm so worried about 6. Right? I was in New England giving a talk, and I had like a 10-minute break. So I pulled my laptop up to check, real quick. And there was an email I got so much I want to tell you. There was an email from from the PE teacher, and the PE teacher said 6 was mouthing off or was talking back when she was dividing them up into kickball teams. And so when I touched down, when I got home, I went upstairs. I said 6. 6 was getting ready for bed. I said 6, I'm not going to have it. I know you were being disrespectful to the teacher. I got the email. She was like, but Dad, she's putting all the best players on the other team. I said, it doesn't matter, right? You're not going to. She said, but Dad, you told me when I found something to be unfair, I should speak out about it. Here's the difference. 6 wants to be educated. 26 is fine with being schooled. There's a difference, y'all, between being schooled and educated. I hope I'm in here with some educators up in this room. And so, difference between discipline and punishment. We could go through these. Discipline and punishment, right? And then last but certainly not least, the curriculum, y'all, should push to social action. Young people want to do something, right? I go into schools and teachers are sweating, working hard, and the students are like, we don't do nothing in here, right? And the teacher's like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm worn out. We've been doing this. But students, they want to feel like they're doing stuff. So there are four levels that I want to talk. The first level is what's known as the contributions approach. And I'm drawing here from Jim Banks. The contributions approach says, we're gonna talk about heroes and sheroes. We're not gonna change really what we teach. We're gonna just focus in on a hero or shero here. The additive approach is a little bit higher, and the additive approach says we're not gonna just talk about individuals. We're gonna have a whole week, right? We're gonna maybe do a whole month. We're gonna add to, not gonna really change the fabric of what we do, right? But we're just gonna add to. The third level is what's called the transformative approach. And the transformative approach says we're gonna change, this is the higher level. We're gonna change the way we think about the curriculum, right? And then the highest level is social action, and that is you're taking what students are learning and they're going to be able to actually do something with it. So this is an example of what social action looks like.
Okay, recording. Okay.
He's just like staring at me. Oh my god.
Everything's
Okay, got it.
Everybody's ready.
Gotcha.
Okay, because we're gonna be really far away.
That's 6 feet.
That's 6 feet. We're good. Okay, so what is Project Talk Soon?
Acting, learning about kindness. Wait, can you repeat it?
Talking,
Acting.
learning about kindness.
Project Talk was founded at Innsworth by Innsworth students and Dr. Rich Milner from Vanderbilt in 2009.
What is the goal of Project Talk?
Completely student-led.
Basically have like real honest conversations.
It's about having a chance to talk outside your bubble about the stuff that's going around in the world.
Learn how to empathize with others.
To gain an understanding from different cultures, different people from different backgrounds.
And learn to disagree without hating each other.
Keep an open mind.
And learn together.
Help people of different social groups to be more comfortable around each other.
Why do you think the goal of Project Talk is important?
We have so much like variety here that doesn't get talked about that often.
A lot of people at our school might be uncomfortable having certain conversations, but they want to have them.
After we leave Ensworth, we're gonna need to be able to communicate things like this in the real world.
We build a better community and stronger community.
A lot of fear and hatred comes from simply like not understanding something.
And so if we start early and we start trying to understand perspectives that are different from our own, it'll be better. That way we can create better solutions.
Initiatives like this, you know, they move. People care when it's your peers doing something.
Why do you think it's important that it's student-led?
It's a different vibe than hardness is.
Openly, like open area to communicate the way we feel and our opinions without having that watch an eye over us.
Students will listen to students.
As opposed to feeling like it's a class or someone's teaching you or like you have to answer in a certain way.
What kind of stuff are we going to talk about?
Topics that you wouldn't normally talk about in an academic setting.
Racial identity,
police brutality,
white supremacy, the LGBTQ community, body image,
sexual harassment,
injustice,
gender, white privilege, boundaries, things that are occurring here at Ensworth that like need to be addressed.
Topics that are often hard to talk about or not even talked about at all.
Why did you join Project Talk?
To have different conversations with classmates I might not normally be able to talk to.
I need to know more about how other people think.
I know the way I feel, I know the way my friends feel, but I just think it'd be interesting and make Ensworth a better community if we all like talked about our different perspectives.
I definitely see what's going on in our country and around the world, and I felt like I needed to step in and play a role in making sure that we can move forward as a society.
As an African American in a school and in a place that's predominantly white, I feel like our voices matter.
I've been here for 13 years and I've seen some change, but I want to help change more.
Me personally, I have a lot of experience with the police, like a whole lot of police racism stuff. So I feel like I'm here and I can like explain my experience with what we're talking about, and I can also like help out others and bring up people who are afraid to talk about this.
Use my voice to like enlighten people about some of the experience like black men.
To help myself like be okay joining those conversations, but also help other people.
To help people find their voice.
I like learning from people, so I wanted to be in a room or facilitate discussions with people that I may not agree with.
Just like important things that are going on right now and that happened over the summer.
Over the summer, I like had a lot of friends or acquaintances. Like I heard a lot of their experiences of issues that they've had at Ensworth, and I think I realized that these difficult conversations needed to be had at Ensworth.
I wanted to not only kind of like help educate others, but also educate myself.
I wanted to be an upperclassman voice for queer underclassmen at Ensworth.
As an African American athlete, I think a lot of the times we get misinterpreted or not interpreted in the right way in terms of like when athletes speak out against something, people tend to look at an athlete as if they're not included in what is being spoken about. I feel like most of the time, a lot of times they're misinterpreted how they feel and they get overlooked as human beings with personal opinions.
That was tough, man.
I believe in talking about issues, because I think when you don't talk about issues, they just get worse over time.
This is the perfect time.
In America right now, or in the world right now,
in today's world,
keeping up to date with what's going on in our world right now. Progress.
I could be a part of something that was bigger than me.
For a bigger cause.
And so I want to grow.
Listen to these conversations. I think it's super important.
So important.
So pressing.
It's really important that we have these conversations on campus.
This is a very important time in life right now, as everything just feels like it's just going so fast and it's getting swept under the rug. I think it's time like we need to talk about this stuff.
Charlie.
Fred.
Claire. Lucy. Lainey.
Amelia.
Addison.
Chloe.
William.
Sachi.
Jacqueline.
Julio.
Gabby.
Ariana.
Naomi.
Sloan.
Esther.
Zion.
Jay.
Gianna.
Noah.
Solwa.
Max.
Ryan.
Claire.
Caroline.
Alexis.
Adair.
Mel.
Laura Grace.
Anna.
Ella.
Tulio.
Devin. Drew. Hey, I'm Andre, and you're watching Disney Channel. So, what am I saying? Just Andre.
All right, y'all. All right. So I'll conclude by just saying there's some young people are going to succeed in spite of you, and some young people are going to succeed because of you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and let's go do the work. Let's do the work. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That was amazing. And it's just that, let me get out the way of your pictures. I do not want to be in those. We are going to move into breakout sessions. Couple of things I want you to know. Each room is going to have the 3 pieces of large poster paper. There will be Post-its. It is like a parking lot.